Hi there, Claire A. Randall at Waking the Monkey, wakingthemonkey.blogspot.com. Well, I've got a reply from an LGBT trans person, social justice warrior, I think I shall have to call them, in reply to my recent video blog on the, this was the one on the gender declaration proposals, and this person unfortunately seems to have got a bit of butt hurt from my comments, so I will pick up on one or two of the points they've made. There's probably quite a lot to go into here, but they start out by saying that they are a pre-HRT SRS trans woman, so I'm presuming that means pre-SRS, because people normally have HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy and SRS means sex reassignment surgery. So if they're pre-HRT, they're almost certainly, they do mean they are pre-SRS, and this person says that they use female facilities, and I'll read out this thing. It's on open page on YouTube, so I'm assuming it's all right to mention this person's name. They call themselves Lily Madigan. Sorry, oh, it was Lady Madigan. Lily Madigan. And they say, I'm a pre-HRT SRS trans woman. I use female facilities. At my secondary school, I ended up suing the administration to allow me to use the female toilets and change rooms to be treated similarly to the other girls. I use the correct facilities for my gender in everyday life, and if somebody wouldn't let me, I would sue them. Oh, that's nice. So I replied, you will alienate people if you force yourself on them too soon. I would suggest you should respect where people are coming from and not disrespect their feelings on this, and the litigious nature of your approach doesn't help. You will create pushback. This is what we're seeing now. I'm seeing a lot of right-wing pushback. Take your time and you will get acceptance. Push it too soon and you will create antagonism. This is a very important thing, I think, with being a transsexual person, is that it is such an unusual thing that I think that you have to allow that not everybody kind of, gets it straight away. So, yeah, something else I go on about. Anyway, I'll get on to that later. So I replied to this, are you UK or USA? Are you seeing a medical profession? How old are you approximately? I say, this is the problem with equality, since, as I pointed out in the video, women and men are different. So if you want to be a woman, you have to be different from a man. I think that's, well, because if it's all about equalities, as we'll get into later, then there's no difference between men and women, so why bother? I think most of my subscribers would agree with me. I hope so. If my subscribers have different views, please, put a comment. That's what it's here for. I don't block comments unless people are really abusive. And I think so. So I say, I think most of my subscribers would agree with me that people shouldn't use the toilets of their desired gender until they are able to at least pass in that gender. If you haven't had any treatment, then that is a question, is it not? Have you had facial hair removal? Okay, so we find out later how old they are. Talking about a class, so they may not have facial hair, but what do girls think when they see you in the toilets? I don't mean those in your class, I mean in any random public loo. What about the pheromone issue, which I raise in the previous video? I say, I'm just old-fashioned, thinking that people should pass in their desired gender before they get accepted as such, or at least they should try, If you don't pass, most women will not accept you in a public loo. This is just a fact. As I say, forcing this will create backlash, not amongst your schoolmates perhaps, but older people who have more experience of the world and understand these things a little better, like your school administration, for instance. You sound very young. Just because a few classmates sign a petition doesn't mean it's right. So this person says, Cosmic Claire, I'm in the UK and I'm 19. My problem with your point is it's imposing a beauty standard. This is such a feminist SJW thing. Beauty standards. We know what is beautiful and we know what is feminine. And by a few classmates, you mean pretty much all of them. Okay, well, you worked on them. They're all programmed by the BBC and everything anyway. I think it's very much a generational issue, and mostly people my age rarely care. Well, it's not what I'm hearing. So that's all I'll say about that. She also says, look, I'm calling her she because this person takes the name Lily Madigan, so okay. Also, humans, now this is just flat out wrong. I mean, they might have some technical evidence for this, but the general proposition is entirely wrong. It says, also, humans don't produce pheromones in the same sense as animals, and the idea of that notion being used to deny someone access to the correct facilities is wrong. Well, that's you say. If you want to look into the science, the vomeronasal accessory olfactory system which detects pheromones in animals is completely non-functional in humans. And then says, I would encourage you to read The Great Pheromone Myth. So I simply replied, I do not accept that. Humans respond to scent on at least a subliminal level, whether our olfactory organs are less effective than animals or not. Obviously, dogs have far greater, much more sensitive sense of smell. We don't have a very sensitive sense of smell compared to many animals, but, we can smell the difference between male and female, which is the point that I'm making. So we'll get back to that in a moment. I'll just continue reading my last few comments. So I said, I don't accept your, quote, beauty standard argument. All you're saying is, my rights. Oh, my rights, Oh, I've got this rights. I'm entitled, The law says that I can do this, so I don't have to actually make an effort. I can just be, this is somebody. Now, yeah. So, they're saying, my rights. You don't respect that 99.8% of people are gender normative, but you insist on your right to impose yourself on them without actually having done anything to change your status yet. Well, apparently not. I mean, this is what I was going to say a minute ago, is if this person said, well, look, I passed so well anyway, nobody knows, and, everybody thinks I should have been a girl anyway, I mean, I had an experience when I was 19, and I was, I passed and I was accepted, and I rather shocked a few people when they realised, because they found out for another reason other than my looks, and if you had that experience, then you should say it. You're not saying it, so I'm kind of wondering whether, how you come across. You don't say anything. This person doesn't say anything about how they come across, how they're perceived, their social experience, blah, 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 blah. All they say is, my rights, equality legislation, I can do this, and if people won't let me do this, I will sue them. So this is where we've got to. They say, oh yeah, right, so I'll get on to this next point. Most people will accept people who pass and don't smell like men. Now, I hate to be blunt about this, but the fact is, men and women do smell different. And I know one of the reasons I pass most of the time is because I don't give off male pheromones. I give off female scent. I mean, I hate to be so blunt about it, but if you can't tell the difference between the way a man smells and a woman smells, then you can't have a sense of fucking smell, for crying out bloody loud. In case you're still on about that, humans don't have pheromones. Have you ever smelt the difference between a men's toilet and a women's toilet? I remember many years ago there used to be an underpass at Leeds City Station, and when you went past, down in the bottom, there was a men's toilet down there, and I think probably one of the main reasons why they will have changed that underpass, they filled in the underpass, they've put an overhead passageway. It's much nicer, you've got a view of the coffee house, blah, blah, blah. And of course no toilets. But the thing about the men's toilets was it absolutely reeked. I mean, every time you went past there, and this is just a blunt fact, basically, So to say that men and women don't smell different is ridiculous. So I've said here, Have you ever smelt the difference between a men's toilet and a women's toilet? If you're not on hormones, then your pee will smell like a man's. If you're a male to female hormone, male to female transsexual, sorry, and you're not on female hormones, then you will be producing male hormones, and male hormones make men's pee, or this person's pee, smell like men's pee, right? I'm sorry to be so blunt about this, but this person is denying brute facts, right? So I say, most people will respect someone who has made a bit of an effort to change their status, but aren't comfortable with people who demand rights without actually doing anything to earn them. So this is back to the whole gender declaration thing. This person says, look, I'm one of the 0.2% of the population, right? Not part of the 99.8% statistically normative, gender normative people that make up the world, but I'm part of the 0.2%, this person's saying, but I don't have to do anything to prove that I'm, part of the 49.9% of women or 49.9% of men. I'm just going to be part of that 0.2%, and I'm going to say, oh, I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to prove anything at all. Jeremy Clarkson postulate. Did I not mention that? The Jeremy Clarkson postulate. The Jeremy Clarkson postulate. This person could be Jeremy Clarkson. They can say, I demand my rights under the Equalities Act. Jeremy Clarkson could do that. I might get in touch with him and see if he'd do it as a joke. Okay, so I'll carry on a little bit. Yeah. And Equalities Act. Well, okay, so the Equalities Act has been passed in 2010, I believe. My comment on this is a piece of legislation designed to destroy nature wherever it exists. Because I don't believe in equality. Men and women are not equal. I'm not the equal of, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Virginia Woolf. We're all different. How can you be equal? How can you make such statements? So this person then replies, I don't understand why anyone should have to earn equality. Well, it's not a matter of earning equality. I've already said equality's a bullshit term. It's meaningless. How can you say that things that are different are equal? So I said the irony is, she says, the irony is that would be inherently unequal. Well, I don't accept equality anyway. It's just bullshit. And this person says, and I can't tell if a man or a woman has used a toilet before me. Sentiment, I presume, would extend to most people. Well, I bloody can. When I have a male guest in my house and he goes to the toilet, I can smell it. And this person obviously hasn't got a sense of smell, and if at the age of 19 they haven't got a sense of smell, and I've got a better sense of that smell than they have in my early 60s, then I fear for their health. It's just nonsense. If you can't tell the difference between a men's public toilet and a women's public toilet, you're bloody stupid or you're ignorant or something. Then I don't accept your beauty standards because it is wrong to treat someone different because of the way that they look. Well, to some extent. But if you see somebody on the street who is very smartly dressed and they come up and ask you the time of day, and they're all well presented and they look nice and everything, well groomed, then I don't think it's unfair to say that you would treat them better than if somebody who looked completely dishevelled and unkempt and ragged. Now, I know this person might not be, it might not be their fault. I give money, to beggars sometimes, or food, preferably if I've got it on me. I do it on the basis of if they're looking a bit ragged. If I see a beggar who's looking really ragged, I will actually be more likely to give them something than if I see a beggar who's looking smart. I think if he's looking so smart as that, why is he begging? So this argument kind of turns itself back on itself. But that's just general appearance on it's wrong to treat someone different because of the way they look. I don't think that's correct. But they say they don't expect my beauty standards because of this. Well, the fact is that, you know, beauty standards exist. They're not my beauty standards. They're universal beauty standards pretty well. I mean, crumbs, you know, people have, there is what you might call a perceptual preset, whereby certain characteristics are seen as perceptually feminine and some as masculine, and the gestalt that people create of people that they perceive and that they interpret and that they constellate in their mind from the different parts of the experience of that person are very much rooted in evolutionary adaptation. We recognise people who are principally, you know, on basis of threat or homogeneity of your own tribe, and also their position as potential sexual market value, I think is what Stéphane Molyneux calls it, and a very significant part of this is assessing whether that person is male or female, because obviously if you know, in the primeval primitive world you want to mate with somebody, obviously you want to know whether they're complementary to your sex and gender. So these things they're largely hardwired, or at least produced by neuroendocrine forces of development of your neuroanatomy. So, you know, if you're born into one status, you know, oh yeah, right. So I've seen these ludicrous memes. Well, ludicrous actually, they're quite funny, because you see a meme of a child being, you know, presented to its mother at the moment of just after birth, and the doctors and nurses are all standing around, and the mother's holding the baby, and it's all, and then so there's the caption underneath it which says, well, the child has a penis, but, you know, I guess we'll have to wait until it's you know, grown up to find out whether it's really a boy or a girl. And you know, of course, that might have been applied to me at birth, but obviously it's ludicrous. It's utterly ludicrous, because there's 99.8% of the population are gender normative, you know, and the 0.2% of anomalies. I would thank another YouTube for referring to that term recently. I'm glad to see that he has been watching some of my material. Yeah, anomalies, right? I accept that I'm an anomaly. And if you are a trans person and you don't accept that you're an anomaly, if you say, oh, well, I'm absolutely female and I've always been female and I've always been female and I don't need any treatment even though I've got bits of male anatomy, yeah, well, you know, I'm sorry, but a lot of people are not going to accept that. And if we ever become part of the Euro Caliphate, I think the people who are transgender, who are incongruent in their desired gender, I think they'll be the first ones to be picked out. Not that I wish to hurry the onset of the Euro Caliphate, but that's just a thought, you know. And this person says, then reminds me of Jim Crow era racist laws where people were divided on the amount of pigment in their skin. Okay, so they're not going to insult me. So oh yeah, right. And it says, ties quite well into your mocking of the southern accent. But I don't know what comment that's about. I did not purposely mock a southern accent. I'm not sure whether they mean a southern English accent or a southern American accent. They've clearly misunderstood something I said, and I'm not going to go and trawl back through my comments or last video or anything, because I have not made this comment, so they're just making it up, basically. And so now also reminds me of Jim Crow era where racist. So she's saying, oh, you remind me of a Jim Crow era racist. So I've made no comment, right? Okay, it's well known. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit that I don't like Islam, but I would remind people, as I told my MP in January of this year, Islam is not a race. You can't be racist against Islam. Islam is an ideology. It's a quasi-religious ideology, right? So this is just another bit of virtue signalling here, claiming that I've made some comment that's quasi-racist, sort of racist, but not really. No, this is absolutely irrelevant. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. And I have given, well, I think it was a 40-minute video or something, wasn't it? The previous one. So I have given a lot of explanation for this. Why I believe that, we should have taxonomy, we should have triage, we should have assessment, so this person is principally saying that they have the right to so basically they're saying they have the right to use female toilets under the Equalities Act because they have already preempted the Gender Declaration Act, which the Tory leftists want to impose on this country, which is getting quite a lot of kickback from conservative groups. I'm fairly certain. I've seen it on the Conservative Woman at least. So conservative women aren't too keen on gender declaration. So and to go back to something I previously mentioned, I think, is that modesty. I do think that modesty is something that is quintessentially feminine, and what this person is doing, what the left are doing with this, bears no value or quality as feminine. Threatening going into women's toilets without having had any medical treatment whatsoever. You're not even started on hormones. Apparently, no mention of having even seen a doctor. But, it's oppressive for somebody like me to have a, quote, beauty standard. In other words, I'm just saying basic female normative appearance is, we have to all kind of accept to biological adaptation, survival adaptation, feminine appearance, female pheromone scent, all of this is irrelevant because they can threaten people with the law. I mean, I don't know, Jeremy Clarkson, the Jeremy Clarkson postulate, I must get in touch with, I must try Jeremy Clarkson because he would love this, So this person is saying, I don't need any treatment, I don't need any assessment, I don't need any diagnosis. I don't even need to cross-dress, apparently. I mean, they haven't claimed they have, and if they were already passing, if they'd already been, dressing and attempting to appear in, as a female then I wonder why they wouldn't say it, because I don't think they have been saying it. So basically, this seems to me like some virtue signaler who is trying to push the law as much as possible and have no respect for people who might have problems with this, like the traditional values, the traditional perceptions that most people have, I think that, anyway, I welcome this person making a fool of themselves, because I know that most of my followers will agree with me. I mean, I know people who are very uncomfortable with the concept of transsexuals at all, you know. But I don't feel it's necessary for me to push and confront them and tell them that they're bigots or anything, because I'm 0.2% of the population, and I think that I will achieve more by interacting with people at a reasonable level and being part of my community than holding a gun to their head and saying, you've got to do this, you've got to treat me in this certain way or I'll prosecute you under this law, this bullshit law, which they're using. So basically they're saying that the Gender Declaration Act is actually, not necessary. Not necessary. We don't need to have a Gender Declaration Act. The Equality Act already slips it in. And, as I've said, the Gender Declaration Act, the Gender Recognition Act of 2004 is very weak, and in my view, it needs to be strengthened so that transgenders who are not recognised either in law or in medicine, or as there a diagnosis, or have had no treatment whatsoever, can't just force themselves. They just can't force themselves into these things. I mean, so if this person is, not bothered to, make any effort to pass that day, and they go into a women's loo, what's young girls to think? I mean, okay, so there's one last thing I suppose I should say about this. In my own experience, I was very, very cautious about this. I did use women's toilets on a few occasions after I'd transitioned, but before I'd completed my treatment, because it seemed the safest thing to do. But I didn't do it until it was quite apparent from a number of episodes that my initial perceptual impression on people was a feminine one. And then I felt, well, if I'm desperate and I can't wait until I get home, then I may be able to do this. And in fact, on one occasion when I was at a hospital facility, which was sex segregated, this was in kind of the early stages of my transition, and it was a bit of an awkward situation. So I went and sat in the men's waiting room, because I hadn't really got my transition that far advanced. And there's only one other person in the waiting room, and this guy, he says to me, I think you've got the wrong waiting room. The women's is over there, it's down the corridor on the third room. And I sort of went, oh yeah, mumble, mumble, mumble. And then I went in to see the doctor about what I had to see her, and the first thing she said to me was, are your periods all right? So from that point on, I thought, well, if I need to use a toilet, I should probably go to the women's one, because I was already on hormones by that stage, so the pheromone issue wasn't a matter. And but this is not. That was a matter of kind of doing what I had to when if it was necessary. But I was very, very cautious about it. Whereas this person, if a woman in a public toilet had looked at me askance and, kind of given me the brush off and said, what are you doing in here? You should, then I would have gone away. I wouldn't have pushed the issue like these justice warriors do, these social justice warriors, who just seem to think that they have the right to say all sorts of things to other people, and that they have no responsibilities, they have no obligations. All it's just rights, my rights, my rights. I can do this, I can do that, and I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong. I think you have to have respect for social conventions, and I think it's immodest, and I think it's indelicate, and I think it's very I think it's just very bad manners, people like this, to make these claims for a start that humans can't tell when others have sinned. I mean, bloody hell, really, God. And then to accuse me of you know, to try and finagle some racism into this, racism, you know, and then I mean, you know, I'm not going to change. This is like I've been on this business. I first came out to somebody about this business in the mid-70s, right? That's over 40 years ago, which is like about over 20 years, more than 20 years before this person was born. I was already considering these issues. I was considering how to deal with them, and it, you know, took me a bit of a while, but I seem to have managed to get through it without causing the kind of problems that people like this Lily Madigan will be inflicting upon society by their attitudes and their behaviour. And their attitudes, it's, you know, I just think it's they should just have a think about how they are dealing with society. It's just wrong, and I know that at the moment, you know, they're completely brainwashed with all this stuff, you know, but I was watching a video earlier this evening in which somebody pointed out that Islam apparently Islam supersedes, overcomes, in terms of victimhood and special minority equality rights and so on and so forth. Islam seems to trump, if you'll pardon that word, LGBT rights. So, you know, I think there might be something down the road for people to realise that, you know, you're not as well protected by the law as you think you are. And the law, frankly, at the moment, the law is being designed to overturn everything. Cultural Marxism has infected everything, and we should do everything we can to sustain traditional values. I'm not suggesting that we should be, you know, negatively discriminatory towards people who are unconventional, but to be able to notice the difference. You know, discrimination before the 1967 Race Relations Act meant just to be able to tell the difference. And if, you know, somebody can tell the difference between a trans person and a non-trans person, then, you know, I would say that it's not the fault of the non-trans person, really. So I hope that my listeners have found this interesting, and I'm sure that young Lily Madigan will have some comments to come back with me. And all I can say about that is keep them clean, keep them polite, and I will do the same. But don't get into all this accusations of racism and things like that, because it's just a straw man. And you know, stick to the points that I've made about conventional society in the 99.8, that we have to find a way of relating to, rather than telling them all that they're evil, transphobic, homophobic bigots, because they haven't quite got their head around the fact that 0.2% of the population have gender identity problems that they might resolve with the assistance of medical aid. So I will just leave it there. I'm sure there's plenty more to be said about this subject, but I've just gone over half an hour, so that's plenty enough for the time being. So please share, subscribe, like, do all the things, put this onto Twitter, and let's get the trolling of the social justice warriors about this on the road, folks, because really it's being taken apart. Conventional society is being taken apart by cultural Marxists, and it's got to be stopped. Okay, thanks a lot for watching. Cheerio, bye. Very important thing, I think, with being a transsexual person is that it is such an unusual thing that I think that you have to allow that not everybody kind of, gets it straight away. So, yeah, something else I go on about. Anyway, I'll get on to that later. So I replied to this, are you UK or USA? Are you seeing a medical profession? How old are you approximately? I say, this is the problem with equality, since, as I pointed out in the video, women and men are different. So if you want to be a woman, you have to be different from a man. I think that's, well, because if it's all about equalities, as we'll get into later, then there's no difference between men and women, so why bother? I think most of my subscribers would agree with me. I hope so. If my subscribers have different views, please, put a comment. That's what it's here for. I don't block comments unless people are really abusive. And I think so. So I say, I think most of my subscribers would agree with me that people shouldn't use the toilets of their desired gender. Feminist SJW thing, beauty standards. We know what is beautiful, and we know what is feminine. And by a few classmates, you mean pretty much all of them. Okay, well, you worked on them. They're all programmed by the BBC and everything anyway. I think it's very much a generational issue, and mostly people my age rarely care. Well, it's not what I'm hearing. So that's all I'll say about that. She also says, look, I'm calling her she because this person takes the name Lily Madigan, so okay. Also, humans, now this is just flat out wrong. I mean, they might have some technical evidence for this, but the general proposition is entirely wrong. It says, also, humans don't produce pheromones in the same sense as animals, and the idea of that notion being used to deny someone access to the correct facilities is wrong. Well, that's you say. If you want to look into the science, the vomeronasal accessory olfactory system which detects pheromones in animals is completely... Hi there, Claire A. Randall at Waking the Monkey, wakingthemonkey.blogspot.com. Well, I've got a reply from an LGBT trans person, social justice warrior, I think I shall have to call them, in reply to my recent video blog on the, this was the one on the gender declaration proposals. And this person, unfortunately, seems to have got a bit of butt hurt from my comments. So I will pick up on one or two of the points they've made. There's probably quite a lot to go into here. But they start out by saying that they are a pre-HRT SRS trans woman, so I'm presuming that means pre-SRS because people normally have HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy and SRS means sex reassignment surgery. So if they're pre-HRT until they are able to at least pass in that gender. If you haven't had any treatment, then that is a question, is it not? Have you had facial hair removal? Okay, so we find out later how old they are. They're talking about a class, so they may not have facial hair, but What do girls think when they see you in the toilets? I don't mean those in your class, I mean in any random public loo. What about the pheromone issue, which I raise in the previous video? I say I'm just old-fashioned, thinking that people should pass in their desired gender before they get accepted as such. Or at least they should try, If you don't pass, most women will not accept you in a public loo. This is just a fact. As I say, forcing this will create backlash, not amongst your schoolmates perhaps, but older people who have more experience of the world and understand these things a little better, like your school administration, for instance. You sound very young. Just because a few classmates sign a petition doesn't mean it's right. So this person says, Cosmic Claire, I'm in the UK and I'm 19. My problem with your point is it's imposing a beauty standard. Oh, this is such a HRT. They're almost certainly, they do mean they are pre-SRS. And this person says that they use female facilities. And I'll read out this thing. It's on open page on YouTube, so I'm assuming it's all right to mention this person's name. They call themselves Lily Madigan. Sorry, oh, it was Lady Madigan. Lily Madigan. And they say, I'm a pre-HRT SRS trans woman. I use female facilities. At my secondary school, I ended up suing the administration to allow me to use the female toilets and change rooms to be treated similarly to the other girls. I used the correct facilities for my gender in everyday life, and if somebody wouldn't let me, I would sue them. Oh, that's nice. So I replied, you will alienate people if you force yourself on them too soon. I would suggest you should respect where people are coming from and not disrespect their feelings on this, and the litigious nature of your approach doesn't help. You will create pushback. This is what we're seeing now. I'm seeing a lot of right-wing pushback. Take your time and you will get acceptance. Push it too soon and you will create antagonism. This is